Judge, anything to say about this?
So I'm sure you guys have been wondering, whatever happened to that Wisconsin judge who was arrested by the FBI for sneaking an illegal immigrant out the back door of her courtroom? Yeah, it's not looking good. She's been indicted and it looks like she has 2 charges against her. We will go through all of these details, but first, let's see what her lawyer has to say.
Dugan appeared before a federal judge this morning before being released from custody. Her attorney saying she wholeheartedly regrets and protests her arrest.
Now that was a very clever response. She shows regret and she shows protest. I don't know if that's going to help her, but let's see what the Director of Homeland Security has to say.
Hannah Dugan, she tried to slide a Biden migrant out the back door and obstruct an ICE arrest at her own courthouse. Well, it looks like she's been indicted. How do you react to that?
Yeah, I'm grateful for that. I'm grateful that the judicial system recognized that she let down the court, let down the country, let down the authority that her position held, and that she will be held accountable for it. So I think that was a great decision coming forward to recognize that nobody can facilitate breaking the law. We shouldn't be able to allow that in this country, and we need to make sure that even judges are held accountable for the actions that they take.
So it goes without saying, Homeland Security is clearly very upset about the entire situation, but now we have the official charges. Let's go with charge number 1. Hannah C. Dugan knowingly concealed EFR, EFR is the illegal immigrant, a person whose arrest, a warrant, and process had been issued under the provisions of a law of the United States, so as to prevent the discovery and arrest of EFR after notice and knowledge of the fact that a warrant and process had been issued for the apprehension of EFR, in violation of Title 18 United States Code Section 1071.
Senator, again, promises made, promises kept. Tom Homan, the president, said, look, you interfere with the lawful work of ICE, and we're going to hold you accountable. And it looks like a grand jury, at least for now, it looks like this is serious for this judge.
Yeah, really serious. Well, it's a federal crime. She committed a crime, and I don't know about you, but I'm tired of these judges all across the country acting like they're above the law, acting like they are some sort of tin-pot dictators who can sit up there and say, oh, here's what we want to do. I'm going to run the country. I'm going to be president. They're supposed to be following the law, Laura. They're supposed to be adjudicating the law, and they're supposed to be following it as private citizens, and this judge was doing neither. So I'm glad she got indicted. I hope they prosecute this thing all the way through. It is outrageous for a sitting judge to be trying to obstruct justice in the United States of America. That's what this individual was doing. This is a clear message to these judges. Start doing your jobs and quit obstructing the fair implementation of justice in this country.
Okay, so here's where things get very serious, and you'll notice that Senator really kept talking about the obstruction charges of all of this. Let's dig into that. Count number 2, Hannah C. Dugan did corruptly endeavor to influence, obstruct, and impede the due and proper administration of the law under which a pending proceeding was being had before a department and agency of the United States, namely the administrative arrest of EFR, again the illegal immigrant, for purposes of removal proceedings conducted by the United States Department of Homeland Security by committing affirmative acts to assist EFR to evade arrest. And they go into details. Before we get into these details, you have to remember Wisconsin judges were almost canceling their court appearances or almost canceling court in general because they were trying to figure out a policy to not allow for ICE agents to go into their courtroom. We will get into that after we read these details because it's rather interesting. So here's where Judge Dugan can face up to 5 years in prison. Confronting members of ICE, task force, and falsely telling them they need a judicial warrant to effectuate the arrest of EFR. Upon learning that they had administrative warrant for EFR's arrest, directing all identified members of the ICE task force to leave the location of the planned arrest, a public hallway outside of the courtroom, 615 of the Milwaukee County Courthouse, and go to the chief judge office. So again, she's telling them to get out of the way, move out of the way, let's meet in the office. Addressing EFR's Milwaukee County Circuit Court's criminal case off the record while ICE task force members were in the chief judge's office. directing EFR and his counsel to exit courtroom 615 through a non-public jury door, and advising EFR's counsel that EFR could appear by Zoom for his next court date, in violation of Title 18, United States Code Section 1505. So again, she's facing up to a potential of 6 years and hundreds of thousands of dollars of fines. This is not a good situation.
Just so everyone remembers what happened, she was actually allegedly escorting illegals out her own courtroom back door to try to, avoid ICE taking custody of them. That's how bad this has gotten. And we have situations with similar, varying, but similar fact patterns in places like Massachusetts. Lord knows how many times this has already happened across the United States. You have the situation in Newark at the ICE facility, Senator, where, everyone's pulling stunts to try to, get on camera and have their viral moments. Protecting the worst of the worst there.
Now, I do want to point out there is a key detail in here that's not added. A lot of people are saying what the judge did was clearly politically motivated, like you just heard. However, there's no details in here for political motivation. I did some research, and apparently it's actually very, very difficult to add that. If you don't have enough evidence, there's no point to add something was politically motivated as far as proving it in the court system. So I just want you guys to know that. Okay, so ever since Judge Dugan has been arrested, there are judges in Wisconsin who want change. They pretty much will not operate or have talked about not operating unless we have some more policy changes, or pretty much not allowing for ICE agents to even come into the area of a judge or a courtroom to conduct their arrest of illegal immigrants. Here's a statement about that.
Your draft policy, what is your current draft policy for how to handle ICE enforcement actions in the courthouse? And is an administrative warrant enough? Do they need a warrant signed by a judge?
Okay, first of all, the draft policy is a draft, but the reality is we have our limitations on what we can do, and what we also want to support our community as well. So the reality is, for my colleagues, we don't have control in the public hallways. An administrative warrant is a warrant that can be effectuated in a public hallway. A judicial warrant has more authority and go into private areas, but we're trying to work out a process where there can be respect for the courtroom.
So I hope you caught that. And again, when we cross-reference what Judge Dugan got arrested for, even in the hallway, there's no jurisdiction for the judge to tell people what to do if an arrest warrant has already been issued. So again, even that county judge, in a very indirect way, is saying, look, Judge Dugan is about to be in some big trouble because our hands are tied behind our back. We have nothing to do with the court hallway.
And what we're doing would allow the Immigration and Customs Enforcement to do what they need to do as well. We just want to stay in our lane. We want to be transparent with the community about what we can do and what we can't.
And funny enough, I'm sure you would all agree, we want everyone to stay in their own lanes. In fact, even ICE does not want to go into the courtroom. Even per court documents, the arrest was going to happen in the hallway. And I just want to point out, ICE agents are always perceived to be like these dumb guys, or ICE doesn't know what they're doing. They clearly know the law if they knew they have access to that hallway, and they are allowed to conduct their arrest in the hallway as well.
I know you can't comment on the case, but we're hearing that some judges in Milwaukee County and elsewhere were pretty shaken up by this. Are you hearing from other judges who are concerned, or?
Well, I don't think you have to speculate. We're all concerned about how it transpired, okay? And so that's not a comfortable situation for any person to have an experience like that, and whether that process was necessary or not. So I'm not going to go any further than that. Thank you.
So I think you'll find this rather interesting. I've been following this case very close, and hardly any Democrats outside of Wisconsin are talking about this case anymore. I think it's pretty self-evident that this judge is about to be in some very big trouble because, again, going into that hallway is a very big deal since she does not have the authority to be in there and tell ICE agents what to do and then sneak an illegal immigrant out the back door. The last time we actually saw this judge being talked about is when Kash Patel was being told he broke policies. After this next clip, we saw nothing. Nobody is talking about this judge anymore.
Let me ask you a question about Judge Dugan, and I'm not going to get into about Judge Dugan, who was arrested taken out in handcuffs from her courtroom. You agree that as director of the FBI, you should lead by example, right?
Try to.
Okay. Well, there's a confidentiality and media contacts policy within the Department of Justice guidelines that says specifically that DOJ personnel should not voluntarily disclose a photograph of a defendant unless it serves a law enforcement function or unless the photograph is already part of the public record in the case. Clearly, Judge Dugan's photograph was not already part of the public record in the case. So it appears that what you did was a violation of that policy, unless you can express a clear law enforcement purpose for having done that.
The simple law enforcement purpose is to show America that we investigate any individual who commits a crime, especially those in positions of public trust.
But do you agree with the presumption of innocence in the U.S. system?
Absolutely. As a public defender, that's what I fought for years. Well, but that's different than
No. But Mr. Director, this is one of the reasons why that guideline is there, so people, especially the director of the FBI, doesn't announce to the country that somebody's already been found criminally liable when they haven't. She hasn't, has she?
But that's not what we said, that she was criminally liable. We said she was arrested and showed it.
Yeah, we know she was arrested, but the issue is the photograph. I'm asking you, going forward, I hope as the leader of the FBI, you will comply with the guidelines.
Okay, so here's the big question. What judge is going to be in charge of this court case? Because we know everyone is going to be watching. Well, it happens to be a President Bill Clinton appointed Adelman all the way back from 1997. What's rather interesting about Adelman is that he had support of Republicans at the time of his appointment. However, there's a little bit of controversy. But political observers at the time saw the support by Thompson and others, and Thompson was the governor at the time, a Republican, as a case of power politics. Democrats controlled the Senate by a one-vote margin, 17-16. If Adelman left the Senate and was given a lifetime appointment to the bench, there would be 16 Democrats and 16 Republicans in the Senate. So that's why it looks like at the time Republicans were all for this guy to try and even everything out. Now, Adelman is known as a liberal judge who conservatives have criticized. Adelman made it to the federal bench and has been criticized by the right for some of his decisions and articles, including a 2020 piece titled "The Roberts Court Assault on Democracy." The article criticized decisions by the U.S. Supreme Court under Chief Justice John Roberts. Well, I think it's safe to say nobody knows what's going to happen, and I don't know if this is going to be publicly broadcasted, like we'll all get to watch inside the courtroom. One thing I do want to point out is because there's so many different charges, and because the one charge where it details how they knew the arrest was going to happen in the courtroom, and the judge knew, and, you know, they kicked out the ICE agents, and she walked the illegal immigrant out the back door. I do think because there's so many details in here, and if you add all of these details, you must have evidence to prove all of this. I do think Judge Dugan is going to be in trouble. Now, as far as facing prison time, that would be a massive deal, and I don't know if this judge wants to be responsible, the judge who's overseeing everything. I don't know if he wants to be responsible for that. So we'll have to wait and see what happens, and we will have to wait and see if there's going to be an appeal. So we're going to be reporting on this for a while now. But it looks like the DOJ has enough evidence to prosecute this judge, and they feel confident. So anyway, thank you guys for being here. God bless, and we'll see you all later.